Risk management is a big topic for project managers. It's so huge because it cuts across all the areas: scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, procurement. Think about it. Whatever the area, risk cuts across it. And that's why I often hear students say, this was hard on the exam. Risk was big. But even beyond the exam, outside of the exam, risk is a massive topic. We all know what happens if we don't plan effectively for how to manage risks. And that's why this is one of my favorite documents of project management, or to be PMBOK precise, let's call it a plan. One of my favorite subsidiary plans. Now, this is talked about extensively in the PMBOK guide. The coverage is massive. One of my friends, Dr. David Hilson, is someone who was very instrumental in putting this together. In fact, he was in charge of this chapter in the PMBOK guide. Very well covered, extremely detailed. I would encourage you to check out his channel. It's called the Risk Doctor channel. If you go to the Risk Doctor channel, your mind will be blown with how intricate risk could be when you address it from a professional perspective. We also have a curriculum that we developed to help RMPs in the making, professionals of risk management who are seeking to take the PMI's exam, the PMI-RMP. More about that on Praizion.com. But let's take a look at the risk management plan. This plan is massive. It could contain so many different things. The possibilities of what it could contain are summarized in the PMBOK guide. So let's go to page 405, and we're looking at the 6th edition. Bear in mind that there is also a standard for risk management, and that standard has got other details and takes on risk management. But let's take a look at this for now. So we're taking a look at one of the inputs, first of all, to planning risk management. And the point I'm trying to address here is risk management cuts across so many areas. And that's the relevance of the project management plan, or whatever exists of it, coming in here as an input. Let's read. It says, in planning project risk management, all approved subsidiary management plans should be taken into consideration in order to make the risk management plan consistent with them. So as you're coming out with your risk management plan, you need to consider any parts of scope, the scope baseline, schedule baseline, the scope management plan, the schedule management plan, the cost management plan, so on and so forth. Anything that exists in the project management plan should be considered. Now it says the methodology outlined in other project management plan components might influence the plan risk management process. Now, with that understood, let's take a look at what is in the risk management plan itself. So follow me to page 405. Let's take a look. It says, the risk management plan is a component of the project management plan that describes how risk management activities will be structured and performed. But what is in this plan? 1, risk strategy, overarching risk strategy. There's a difference between the strategy versus the methodology. The strategy is a high-level approach to risk in general. The methodology, which is a second bullet, defines the specific approaches, tools, data sources, and other minutiae that will be used to manage risks on the project. The third bullet is roles and responsibilities. Who will do what in terms of risk? The fourth is funding. Where do we get funding from? I've heard from the past that students say, Phil, we do not manage risks in a calculated fashion because we don't have the funds to do it. Now, while that's a bit blown out of proportion, there does need to be funding to perform activities related to project risk management. Timing. How frequent will these activities take place on the project? And the last bullet on page 405 addresses risk categories. The risk breakdown structure, which is a term Dr. David Hilson coined back in the early 2000s, is shown on page 406. Just like we have other breakdown structures, work breakdown structures, organizational breakdown structures, we also have a risk breakdown structure. The risk breakdown structure breaks down risks into categories. It states a common way to structure risk categories is with an RBS, which is a hierarchical representation of potential sources of risk. An RBS helps the project team consider the full range of sources from which individual project risks may arise. Let's turn the page over to 407. Stakeholder risk appetite. What do we mean by appetite? How much food are you willing to eat? How much food are you hungry to eat? What kind of appetite do you have? Link the appetite to hunger. In order to quantify or qualify hunger, you typically attribute it to a size of food. And then to qualify or quantify appetite, you link it to hunger for something. So when you think about risk appetite, you got to think about how hungry is the stakeholder for an opportunity. How hungry are you? How much risk are you willing to take on to pursue the opportunity? That's how you need to be thinking about that. It says the risk appetites of key stakeholders on the project are recorded in the risk management plan as they inform the details of the plan risk management process. In particular, stakeholder risk appetite should be expressed as measurable risk thresholds around each project objective. Watch this. These thresholds will determine the acceptable level of overall project risk exposure, and they are also used to inform the definitions of probabilities and impacts to be used when assessing and prioritizing individual project risks. In other words, the acceptable level of overall project risk exposure that a stakeholder is willing to take on to get fed, to pursue the opportunity, to be satisfied. So you got to link the appetite to the opportunity. Last bullet here says definitions of risk, probability, and impacts. This is big, and this is also a massive missing link on many projects, because a lot of project managers call a risk a 1 on a scale of 1 to 5, but they have not defined the 1 for the other stakeholders to understand what is a 1. And that's why on page 407, the example of definitions of probability and impacts is a great takeaway for every project manager that manages risks using a probability and impact matrix without definitions. We got to define these. Some firms are awesome at doing this, but others lack what a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the scale is, what those numbers really mean. So in this example on page 407, you can see what very high means. Very high in terms of probability means greater than 70%. Very high in terms of impact, looking at the schedule perspective, is greater than 6 months. Very high in terms of cost is greater than 5 million. So this is a method to follow when you're working on risks with your team. The next page, we have the probability and impact matrix, which takes those definitions, puts them into a matrix, and it's a rapid way for you to identify a risk score. The probability and impact matrix have probability ratings and an impact rating, and multiplied, these give you a risk score. All of this should be addressed in the risk management plan. So you can see why it is a massive document and it needs careful consideration by way of the possibilities. Now, this is not always as massive on every single project, but the possibilities are endless. Just remember that in your organization, the approach to risk may be very scaled down, But if you're working on a high visibility project where the stakes are high, you want to up the ante on your risk management approach. The last two bullets here are reporting formats. Those should be in the plan, and tracking how risk activities will be recorded and how risk processes will be audited. I hope this helps you frame an understanding of what exactly the risk management plan is. It's a plan that defines and guides your risk management approach. We look at the strategy, but we also get into the methodology. Thank you for joining me. Remember, visit Praizion.com, take a look at the curricula I told you about, and don't forget to check out the Risk Doctor channel. Talk to you tomorrow.